Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. This week I'm going to be going over some tips and tricks to help you improve your Bloxburg house build. So let's just get straight into it. The first thing I would recommend is to make sure your build matches to the season. And while you don't always have to do this, when it's coming out to winter time, your build should really have a winter theme to it. So the same with summer and also autumn, so you might want a fall theme, and in the summer you probably want a swimming pool in the garden of your build and things like that. So that will just basically match with the rest of the builds inside the server and also match with the floor colour inside of Bloxburg as well. So in the winter when the floor becomes white and snowy, you want to make sure that your build kind of matches that aesthetic so it doesn't stand out too much. There are obviously some exceptions for this, so for example a while back I did a Barbie build, and this can kind of work for any season. So you just want to kind of see if it's a roleplay build, then I would definitely recommend matching it to the season, whereas if it's just a showcase build then you can match it to any season. One thing that I will always say is to make sure you try and get the custom colours as soon as possible. For me personally, this has been really helpful for any build that I do, and while I don't use loads and loads of different colours, there's a few that really just improve the builds in my opinion, and it just makes them look way more detailed. There are obviously still loads of replacements you can use instead of the custom colours, which still definitely result to really good builds, but sometimes there's just a colour that you really want between two different colours and it just doesn't exist, so that's when the custom colours comes in really useful, and it's especially useful if you're doing realistic builds as well. If you're just doing kind of an aesthetic build, then you most likely won't need it as much. Obviously it's still good because you can just get kind of any colour, but especially for realistic I would definitely use it so you can experiment with different shades of colours. Leading on from kind of experimentation, also experiment with different textures. Now I know sometimes you kind of want to stick to the same texture because it can look good, but also using textures can also make builds look way nicer. So for example, matching it to what it is again, so if it's a pillow, as you can see kind of behind me right now, have it kind of like a material, and that will just work way better. There's obviously some plastic kind of texture ones you can see right to the left, and it does work with other textures as well, whereas if it was all just kind of plastic, it's going to look really basic and fake. This again mainly works for realistic builds, so ones that aren't realistic, not as much focus is needed to be on the textures, but I would always recommend having a variety of textures. It just makes the build look more interesting, and personally I think it also looks better as well. There's obviously some textures that are kind of ugly, so I would just experiment, and even textures you actually hate a lot can work really well on certain items. It's always hard to find really good inspiration for builds and kind of know what to do, so the things I would recommend is using Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram and also Twitter. All of these platforms combined can give you loads and loads of different ideas for your build. So for example, Pinterest is what I always start with. You can just search for any kind of style you're going for, so let's say autumn house, and then it will just come up with loads of inspiration. You can type the interior, the exterior, and they'll all give you different results. Pinterest is also really good for layouts as well, so if you're looking for a layout then you can do that. There's also fireworks happening, so ignore that if you hear that in the background as well right now. I would normally just basically base most of your build on a Pinterest build. Obviously you can do your own unique ones, but to start with, until you get the hang of exactly what to do for layouts and designs, then I would suggest using Pinterest, and then using different things like YouTube, Instagram and Twitter to come up with different colour schemes. So this is really useful, and especially if you want one with custom colours, you can find loads of videos with different custom colours that people would recommend to put inside the builds. For me personally, this is basically the hardest part of doing a build, making sure everything always matches. So using different social medias is really good, and I can also see different build hacks and things like that as well that also add detail to builds. Leading on from layouts, they should kind of make sense. Obviously that kind of stretches very far. There's so much that can kind of make sense, but you don't really want to have a bathroom leading onto a bedroom. So you don't want to first enter into a bathroom and then have to walk through the bathroom to get to the bedroom. That's just not practical. It wouldn't work in real life, so it shouldn't really work on Bloxburg instead. Instead, have a bedroom and then a bathroom leading on from that, which will make way more sense for builds. If you're unsure on what to do, I'd recommend starting off your build by using the really thin, short fences in Bloxburg and planning out the layout then. Once you've confirmed it, you can obviously delete these fences and then finish it off with the walls as well. I also have an Etsy PDF which has a nice grid for you to plan out your builds on, so make sure to go check that out in the description if you'd be interested in that, and it's also got some more tips and colours on there as well. Make sure to have colours that match each other again, so don't go too bright, especially during the winter seasons, and even during summer don't really go with the neons. Nobody uses them really, they're really outdated. Unless you're doing like a neon cafe that is specifically neon, definitely just kind of stay away from those really bright colours. They really don't work with a lot of stuff. You can make a colourful build, but you don't have to use those really bright ones. I just personally don't think it looks good with anything, but obviously it is a style, so if you do want a really bright build, then go with that, but I would not say make the walls like a bright pink colour. I would just have details being bright pink, so pillows and things like that. And these colours normally work best in a child's room as well, so I wouldn't really have like a bright pink living room ever. Instead, you could have like a bright pink kids bed or something like that instead. But overall, you should really enjoy the style that you're doing. I mean, don't make something that you know you're not going to like. You want it to match your personality and something that you'll actually use as well. Another tip is also making sure your builds aren't too big, because normally I would basically say the bigger your build is, the harder it is to fill it up. Now this is especially with detailed builds, and yeah, you just don't really want to have those really awkward empty spaces. You always want to have something in everywhere you look, so that's in the entrance, in the kitchen, in the dining room, so you want it all to kind of flow, and starting off with a small build is always good. You can always add to it if necessary. So I mean, in this build right now, I literally added a whole separate room kind of halfway through because I realised, oh, I want it to be a bit bigger. So you can always do that, you're not constricted to the kind of layout that you start with. I would also recommend starting off with one room, so don't kind of switch between a bedroom, a living room and a kitchen, let's say. Just start with one of the rooms, so let's say a living room. Once you think you've basically done with that living room, just try and copy that style. As hard as that sounds, it is actually quite easy. Like once you have some items that you know match well, once you have some colours and textures, you can duplicate this throughout the rest of the house and it definitely looks really good. This is also what you can use with Instagram. If you find like, let's say a living room that you really like, try and replicate that living room in your build, but instead as a kitchen, for example. So you're taking that same style, but using your own kind of ideas on it, so you're not going to have a build that looks the exact same to someone else's. Now it's time to go on to kind of the details of a build. So I would basically just say, use the transparent two-sided decals as much as possible to get custom plants. They are very pricey, I will admit that, but I would definitely say set aside some of your budget for them, especially if it's a realistic build. It just adds so much character to a build, and even if it isn't that realistic, it still just massively improves how a build actually looks overall, and I would just super recommend them. You can find loads of different kind of trees and plants that you can use for it, and it's not even just for potted plants, or you can make huge trees from them as well, and it just really adds a lot of detail to builds. And I think since they've added that to the game, I don't think I've done a build without it. There are also loads of accounts with good decals as well, so you don't want to have a, let's say, living room with a decal that doesn't match the style at all. The decal should match the style, so you can find loads of different accounts, mainly on Instagram, that kind of have different styles of decals, and they basically have like 10 or something on one page, so you can copy all of those decals down. So as you see from this example, I mean, this is how it looks with good decals, but then as soon as you change it to not so good decals, it just gets rid of the whole vibe in the room and it doesn't look as nice anymore and not as cozy. So making sure you have good decals is a really good foundation to make sure all of your builds look the best they can be. Also, be realistic. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a realistic kind of style or not, but would you kind of put, let's say, a laptop in a bathroom? I mean, you wouldn't, because that would not function in real life. You would never have that. So you should kind of imitate that in Bloxburg as well. Obviously you can add extra items that you wouldn't have in real life and kind of custom it how you want, but there would be no function for a laptop in a bathroom, so, or let's say a stuffed toy in a bathroom. So just kind of go on that and just use your senses a bit to see what would actually work in a room and what wouldn't. In my opinion, to make a build look way cozier, you should use items specific to the rooms. So in an office, you can use calculators, pens, paper, things like that you wouldn't see in kind of any of the other rooms. In a garage, you can have a toolbox, you can have hammers, spray paint, things like that really make the room unique and doesn't make it look the same to basically every other room inside the house as well. I mean, overall, don't really be scared to go out of your comfort zone. That's how people learn, that's how people improve their builds. So for example, I always used to do blush builds, and one day I was like, oh, let's just try doing some more realistic builds. And from then, my style has evolved to doing more realistic builds. So just do the same for you. If you've noticed all of your builds have kind of been the same style, don't be scared to try something different. You might turn out to really like the final product. While you see lots of different custom things on social media like TikTok and YouTube, You should also be kind of realistic, so especially in role plays, you want to make sure all of the items work fully. You don't want a chair that you can't sit on, so if you're especially keen into having a family in Bloxburg, that just wouldn't be practical, having a chair that you can't sit on. So instead, make sure it actually works. Just use one of the pre-made Bloxburg ones. They're honestly not that bad. You can always decorate it more with pillows and blankets and things like that, but if you are doing anything custom, make sure it still has the purpose it's meant to do so. Right now, this looks like kind of like a really big bed, but underneath all of this, there are different sleeping bags, which means this is actually like usable. So if you were doing kind of like a role play, you wouldn't want there to not be an opportunity to sleep in a bedroom. That doesn't make any sense. So make sure all of it does make sense. For adding more details, I would also say see what stuff you can resize. There's a lot of different items that will appear to be really small and you won't see a use for it in your build at all, but once you resize it, it can actually look good. So for example, I have these pumpkins right here, and once you resize them to be big, they kind of look like pillows or toys, and personally I think they look really cute and they definitely add detail to the room. And you know, if I didn't resize it, I thought this bed would be kind of bare without it. So just see what stuff you can actually resize, and resize those plants outside as well so they're not all the exact same size. Especially because it's coming up to winter, definitely make your builds feel more cozy with seasonal decor, candles and different frames as well. So you can add stuff like Christmas wreaths on the door, add in candles on tables and frames of maybe your Bloxburg family if you're role playing, or just in general any nice pictures, and it honestly just looks so cozy. Like, it just adds a whole sense of detail and things like that. And with seasonal decor, especially during Christmas, you can add things like a Christmas tree, which literally looks so nice in any build, and during autumn you can add pumpkins and things like that as well. I think many people also fall into the trap of their builds looking really similar every single time. Add unique stuff to your build each time. Try and do one more thing that you haven't ever done before. So for example, unique structures, so add in curves between different rooms to separate them always is a nice touch. So kind of these round beams, as you can see here, just really look nice, and it separates the different rooms so people know kind of where they're meant to be, because open plan is good, but you also want to distinguish between the rooms as well. Personally, I don't really follow this next tip, but I would definitely recommend doing it, is adding a garden, because gardens always look so nice. I mean, most like real life houses do have a garden, unless it's like an apartment, which obviously you wouldn't really have a garden. You might have a balcony though, but a garden is just so nice, and I always forget to do it because, you know, I'm rushing to do a speed build or whatever. But yeah, if you're just doing for like a role play or just for fun, gardens are like super underrated and always look really nice. Now that you've got the garden sorted out, and you're obviously going to have the front of your house done as well, people always forget the sides of the house, and I'm definitely guilty of this. Like, I never decorate the sides of my houses, and honestly this just decreases how it looks like so much. Like, if people drive to your house and they see like a really ugly side of the house, it's just not going to look as good. But you want every single side to have some sort of interesting feature, and if you see a side of your house is looking really ugly and you just kind of don't know what to do with it, just add a tree in front of it. People will not really pay that much attention to the sides, but I think you should always have some sort of detail, and on the back as well, because, you know, you want it to always look nice. So that's what I would recommend. And if you're doing a garden, that normally also makes you do the back garden better as well. So I mean, if you're not sure what to do for the back of a house, just do a garden and follow on from there to do details. I'd basically just say also have reference pictures for kind of any room with different inspiration and ideas, where you don't have to copy exactly. You can kind of make your own build hacks to do it. So let's say a unique fireplace, you can see a picture online of a really nice fireplace and think, what structures can I use to duplicate this, or different items which could mimic the same thing, and just try. Honestly, it's a lot easier than you think trying to make like items the same as in real life, and once you've kind of done the same as the picture, it will definitely feel really rewarding as well. I hope these were some nice tips for you to follow, and let me know if there's any other tips I didn't mention and that you also think are really useful down below, and also which one you think is going to help you the most with your next build. Thank you so much for watching, and have an amazing rest of your weekend, and I'll see you all next time for a new speed build.